Classo, and welcome to another episode of Transport in Africa, a weekly podcast dedicated to spotlight cutting-edge research, innovations, and ideas shaping transport systems across Africa. I am your host, Polycarp Chebe. In each episode, we sit down with a researcher, practitioner, or change maker who is redefining how mobility works in Africa. In today's episode, we are driving into a topic that sits at the heart of sustainability across the world: cycling. Across Africa, bicycles play a vital role in helping millions of people move, often filling the gap where former transport options are limited or too costly. Yet, despite its importance, cycling remains understudied, underplanned, and often misunderstood. Initiatives aimed at promoting cycling in many parts of Africa remain limited. To help us unpack this, I am joined by Dr. Classio Minziad, a senior transport consultant, researcher, and lecturer at the University of Rwanda. Dr. Classio brings extensive experience in transport engineering and urban planning. He is one of the few scholars with a deep, dedicated research background on cycling in sub-Saharan Africa. In this conversation, we will explore the state of cycling on the continent, the challenges that shape its adoption, how African cycling context differs from those in the global north, and what it would take to build safer, more inclusive, and more dignified cycling systems for all. Hello, Dr. Classio. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Polycarp. Good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Doc. Before we get into the conversation proper, can you tell us a bit about yourself, your research background, and experience working on transport-related issues across Africa?
Well, thank you so much. As you said, my name is Classio. I'm transport planner, and I work at the University of Rwanda for almost 4 years. And currently, my research is focused on cycling, road safety, walking, public transport. And we have been actively researching in many African countries, try to understand what's going on, what is the state of cycling in those cities, and also how people are moving, which challenges people face in those cities. And I see this as a very good opportunity to share with you, to share with the large audience what's going on in Africa. Because as you say, cycling and walking are the two main modes of transport in our cities, but unfortunately, they are misunderstood, and also very few people know what's going on in those cities when it comes to this mode of transport. So this is what I am, this is what I do in my daily basis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doc, for that brief introduction. For our listeners who are not familiar, can you provide an overview of the cycling landscape in Africa, highlighting how cycling has evolved across the continent over the years?
Well, thank you. Well, cycling is one of the main modes of transport, probably together with walking, they make one the most important mode of transport in many African countries. Unfortunately, along the years, we observe that the cycling share in the city, especially in the large cities, is declining. Many studies from World Bank, even for the UN, they indicate that in large cities like Lagos, Maputo, Johannesburg, in many other cities, cycling share is even less than 5%. And there are so many causes behind it. Probably we're going to discuss it a little bit late. But what we observe that there's a shift of cycling share is declining in large cities, but is increasing in small cities. So there are many issues behind it. One of the issues that, well, we see a growing number of cars in the large city due to, easy acquisition of vehicles, but also very long travel distances, which are mainly influenced by, let's say, poor distribution of the land use, which contributed largely to increase the travel distances. And in small cities, cycling become also affordable because most of time of the shorter distances, but also is one of the most affordable but also available mode of transport, because what I see in most of those cities, there are no public transport. Even the most of the people living there, especially in the rural area or even the periphery, they don't have access to good infrastructure, and cycling become a mode of transport that can easily deal with it. Just to summarize in 2 or 3 words, just say that cycling is declining in larger cities, and let's say it's increasing or maintain the same level in smaller cities. But if you don't do anything, probably the same issue which is affecting the reduction of cycling in larger cities, probably in a very short period of time, these will be also observed in smaller cities, and cycling share will also decline also in those small cities. So that's why this is a very good moment to have a conversation about around it, to see what can be done in order to contribute to, first of all, to increase the cycling share in the large cities, but also at least to maintain the current level of cycling in the smaller cities.
Thank you very much, and interesting to hear the dynamics taking place within the cycling sector in sub-Saharan Africa. Doc, like walking, cycling is associated with many misconceptions in many parts of Africa, such as regarding cycling as a transport mode for the poor, leading to poor policy implementation and investment. From your experience, what are some common misconceptions or biggest challenges preventing wider cycling adoption in sub-Saharan Africa?
Yeah, well, as I said before, there are so many challenges which are preventing the adoption of cycling. One of them is this understanding, as you said, that cycling is a mode of transport for poor. But also, probably one of the most important challenge is lack of infrastructure, but also the poor land use planning. I said it before, the land use planning, as you can observe in many cities, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, you see that let's say the inner city is where all the, let's say, high utility activities are concentrated, and where the wealth people live. And most of those people, they normally own their cars and they use car even for shorter distance. While when we move away from the inner city, the travel distance increases, but also the quality or even the density of services declines. So making that those people mostly owning only bicycle live far away from the inner city, but they have to travel every day to the inner city where most of the activities or services are concentrated. So this also, at one moment, people start using bicycle because they don't have alternative, but when their income, the family income also start increasing, there you will observe a very gradual shift from bicycle. People start moving to motorcycle, then from motorcycle, people shift to cars and so on. So this is one of also the main challenge, which to see the implication of the land use distribution on the cycling adoption. We need to take consideration this issue. Most of people, they don't look the impact of the land use distribution on mode choice, but we need to always to alert the decision makers that when you're planning for the land use, you need to make sure that all the people, especially those using bicycle, they don't need to travel very long distance to the services. Otherwise, you'll see that in the very near future, most of people shifting to bicycle, to motors, or even to motorized mode of transport. The other issue is regarding to infrastructure. As you say that, well, cycling is considered as a secondary mode of transport, particularly for the lens of the policymakers or even the decision makers. They don't consider cycling as, let's say, one of the main mode of transport in our cities. And therefore, what happens that cyclists, they normally use the remaining side of the road infrastructure. What is remaining is there for cyclists. But if you look, when I look for smaller cities like Kisumu, like Kilimani in Mozambique, like Tamale in Ghana, you see that the cycling share there is very high, and the cycling infrastructure is still very poor, very unconnected, and the proportion of the road used by cyclists is very small, which for me is not very fair because they represent the large majority and they receive a very limited space in the road, so then that can be used for them. So this also another issue, because with very good infrastructure, this promotes safety, and if people feel safer cycling, this also will attract more people, even children, to start cycling to work, to school, and so on. So I see also cycling infrastructure as one of the biggest challenge. But another challenge, probably not very important, is also greening, lack of trees. We see that in most of our cities, the weather is very hostile, it's often very hot, and cycling is active mode of transport, which requires human effort. And then if you don't have a tree cover, so this becomes very unpleasant to cycle under a very intense sun. So we see that in most of our cities, we don't have enough trees, particularly along the main cycling corridors. So this also become a very important barrier for cyclists. Among that, there are so many others, but here I just want to highlight the three barriers which we found in one of our study in Kilimani, which also can be very representative in many other African cities.
What do you think governments and decision makers need to do to ensure that cycling, like in most European countries, is not just possible, but also safe, dignified, and valued as an important mode of transport in sub-Saharan Africa?
Yeah, I think one of the issue is to provide infrastructure, okay, cycling infrastructure. When I say infrastructure, it's not just to have those border the remaining side of the roads to be kept it for cyclists. You need to design and invest in proper cycling infrastructure. And one of the issue which I normally see in those cities, in the African cities, is that those infrastructures do not connect where most of people live and where most of people want to go. Okay, you see, I remember in Mozambique, in Maputo, there's a cycling infrastructure along the marginal. Marginal is along the beach, but it's very high income area. So most of people living in those areas, they don't cycle. So then, if you ask the decision makers or the transport authority, you might hear that yes, we have a cycling infrastructure in Maputo, but that cycling infrastructure do not serve those who really cycle in Maputo. So this one issue. We need to invest in infrastructure, and that infrastructure should be able to connect where people are living and where people want to go, not just to design infrastructure and implement where I want to put. Because that cycling infrastructure in Maputo only serves the high income individual, and those individuals normally they cycle in the weekend or even they cycle for leisure or for sport. While those utility cyclists, they don't have cycling infrastructure, and this is observed in many African countries. But also the second issue is regarding to safety. We need to make sure that, especially the intersections, are very well designed, because most of the road accidents they take place at the intersections. We need to make sure that there are clear distinction between different modes of transport, but also to allow cyclists, but even pedestrians, to cross the intersection in very safe way. And the third thing, combining what I said before, we should look also for the distances, because you cannot expect that any individual will commute will use bicycle for commuting to traveling very long distance. Let's say along 10 kilometers or even 20 kilometers per day. This becomes very difficult. That individual probably might cycle at that moment because they do not have any alternative. But then, as the income increases, that individual is going to shift it to a motorized mode of transport. So then, the transport authorities, they need also to pay attention on the land use distribution to see how to spatially distribute the land use. So then this can affect the overall cycling distance to activities.
Thank you once more for that clarification. Doc, How can researchers, urban planners, and civil society organizations better collaborate with government to inspire and support more inclusive planning for cycling in Africa?
I used to see very good examples across Africa. Let me focus on one example in Kilimani, which is also one of the very popular cycling city in, in, in Mozambique. That, well, right now they are implementing a cycling infrastructure, but the way they designed the infrastructure, the way they identified the priorities, it was a very interactive way where all the different stakeholders, the Bicycle Tax Association, civil society, all the main stakeholders, they came together with the municipality of Kilimani. They identified the key issues and also how to tackle those issues. And right now, they are implementing the infrastructure. So I think that this is also a very good way of doing things. We need to bring together all the key stakeholders to sit with them and to understand what is the problem, what is their desire when it comes to the cycle infrastructure, but then to see where that infrastructure should be implemented. And then after that, you can implement something that will meet the needs of the people. Otherwise, you're going to you're going to build infrastructure which is disconnected from the real users, and then at the end, that infrastructure will not be able to solve the issue that we want to tackle. So I think this is a very good example how things should be done. And I also used to see these kind of examples in Kigali. They bring together all the key stakeholders, they sit together, they design things, and all the stakeholders are directly involved with. And then at the end, we see that things work and infrastructure is there and people use the infrastructure. So I think this one of the issue that we need to pay attention, and there are very good examples. What we need to do is just to see and also try to replicate in our cities.
Doc, from your perspective, are there any specific cities or regions in Africa that you can cite as emerging leaders in cycling adoption or infrastructure? And what are some of the lessons that other African countries or cities can learn from them?
Yes, from my experience, I know very few cities in Africa which provided very good infrastructure. I'm not saying that all the cities are in the same, do not have a good infrastructure. I'm going just to cite 3 or 4 cities which I have some experience. I've been there. I've experienced cycling there, but I know that probably there might be many other African cities. One of them, which have very good cycling infrastructure, especially in the inner city, is the city of Kigali. City of Kigali is doing very well. They have very good infrastructure, although that the infrastructure presents some challenges. In some places, the infrastructure is not connected or do not connect to activities with to high utility activities, or do not connect from the, let's say, the places where most of the cyclists live. But at least they are doing a great job. The infrastructure is there and is very well functional, which is segregated clearly different modes of transport. You see walking one side, cycling another side, but also cars running the other side, which provides a very safer cycling environment in the city. The other city also, which I can also consider to trying to have some good infrastructure, is the city of Kilimani in Mozambique. They're doing also a great job together with many partners, and they're investing a lot in cycle infrastructure. Although that their cycle network is still very limited, I think is around right now is around 10 kilometers or probably something around that, which is not that much, but they are doing a great job. And probably in the near future, we might see the infrastructure being complete and also to contribute to more better cycling environment in the city. The other city which I visited and I enjoyed cycling there, city of Tamale in Ghana. They also have it's not that very good infrastructure, but I see a huge effort from the city to promote their cycling infrastructure, to connect, let's say, densely populated neighborhoods to the large market, which I also see the issue of connectivity becoming there very clear. So I used to visit cities in South Africa. There, you see some of the cities, they're also bringing, they're having a very good cycling infrastructure. So these examples you might see all over the African cities, but now probably what is needed is, in general, to improve the quality of the infrastructure, to improve connectivity, to improve the intersection, so then the cyclist can cross the intersection in a very safe way. But overall, there's this huge movement in many African cities to provide cycling infrastructure in order to keep the cyclists safer while they're using the roads. So there are some good examples. As I said before, I don't know all of them, but those which I visited, I can say that they're very good examples. They're very promising examples. I'm sure that at this moment, those infrastructure they've evolved a lot, and for sure this contributes a lot to attract more people to cycle.
Just to add that one of the cities I also recently visited and stayed there for a while is the city of Addis Ababa. I discovered that they are also providing very wide cycling infrastructures for
Yeah,
cyclists, which is also laudable. As there is the saying that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a step. Hopefully, in the
of
nearest
course.
future, other cities are going to join, or Africa cities will be widely connected with cycling infrastructures, just like it is with European cities. Doc, based on your experience, if you were to advise a city government starting from scratch, what are the top priorities for developing a cycling friendly city in sub-Saharan Africa?
I think one of the issue which I always see as a concern is regarding to distance. As I said before, most of the African cities, they still have the colonial structure as the core, the inner city, while the periphery, where most of the low income individuals live, they normally are disconnected from the inner city. Disconnected especially, but also disconnected when it comes to distance to the inner city. So these become one of the key issues, because you see that those who really need to cycle, they do not have infrastructure, they do not live at a cyclable distances. Okay, so then they make a huge effort to move from one point to another. So this should be something that need to be addressed in very, very serious way. And what I see that this issue is still not very well addressed, because this require a lot of investment. I think it's possible, because if you improve the land use, we distribute the activity equally, especially the activities equally, this probably might reduce the travel distance for the majority of people, and therefore this will attract more people to cycle. The second issue right now, which we see, that is about safety. So road safety become a big challenge in African cities, and especially cyclists and pedestrians. They've suffered a lot due to this, let's say, this tendency of not respecting the cyclists, not respecting the other road users. So I think improving road safety is issue that need to be addressed very seriously. I see nowadays there's a huge movement, a lot of studies looking for how to improve road safety in African cities. And I see this one also to be an issue that needed to be taken into consideration by the authorities in order to make the cities cyclable. And the third issue, well, probably also to improve, because as you said at the beginning of this conversation, is that most of people, they look for cycling with a stigma. They look for cyclists as poor people, as individual, or do not have alternative. I think is a moment which we promote this mode of transport. But by, as we used to say, that the example must come from the top. We need to see African leaders to cycle, to use bicycle for their daily, because they cannot promote cycling without showing examples. So we need to see some examples for them using bicycle even for, at least for those short distances, just to be example in order also to motivate other people to cycle, but also to reduce this perception that cycling is a mode of transport for poor. So I think this is also one recommendation which I beg for the African leaders to start cycling, to start showing to people how cycling is good, how cycling is safe, how cycling is health. So this probably might attract many other people to start using bicycle for their daily activities.
Thank you very much. Improving investment in cycling infrastructures by setting dedicated budgets, just like they do with car, changing mindsets of people, especially when it comes to their perceptions towards cycling, and encouraging mixed land use development across African cities may just be some of the issues that city authorities need to pay attention to in order to improve cycling across the continent. Dr. Classio, before we wrap up this conversation, is there anything else you would like to share, perhaps about your future project or a final message for our listeners?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Polycarp, for inviting me for this conversation. Just to encourage you to continue doing this wonderful work you're doing to share with a very large audience of what's going on in Africa. And from our side, currently we have been working a lot on issue with regard to road safety, which I see as a very important issue. Try to investigate more on road safety can continue in many other African countries, because right now, as I said, investment is limited, mainly received for the external partners, which is also not becoming very enough to cover all the issues that need to be covered. So I really want to encourage African leaders to start looking for the issue of road safety, because nowadays road safety become a big challenge in African cities, especially for cyclists and pedestrians. And very few studies are being conducted, and very few studies have been ongoing when it comes to road safety in Africa. So I really want to encourage to see how can we as African researchers come together to continue doing our studies, continue collecting data, analyzing data, and come with very scientific oriented decisions in order to improve safety for pedestrians and cyclists in African cities. So this is the issue which we are doing right now with a lot of limitations, but well, I believe that in the future will be bright, and probably we also might be able to secure more resources in order to continue working, to continue researching, to continue researching regarding to road safety.
That brings us to the end of this episode of your podcast on transport in Africa. Dr. Klaso Minziad, thank you very much for accepting to share your insights on cycling in sub-Saharan Africa. I wish you all the best in your professional journey and your research endeavors.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Polycarp. I also wish you success and also continue with this brilliant work you are doing to bring together researchers and working in Africa. So I think this is a wonderful opportunity to understand what's going on in Africa. Thank you so much, and also wish you all the best.
If you enjoyed this episode or learned something new, please consider subscribing to our page. You can also contribute by sharing this podcast with friends and colleagues who are interested in transport and mobility issues in Africa. If you are a researcher or practitioner working on transport in Africa and would like to share your work on this platform, feel free to reach out to me at chebechesifu@campus.technion.ac.id, and we can discuss how to feature your work on this show. Until next time, I am your host, Polycarp Chebe. Thanks for listening